see you guys in the dark.
I have been a part of Tinder for a while. I have had some pretty good dates and a few bad dates. There are three ladies in particular that were absolutely batshit crazy, and here are my stories. The first lady I met in New York City, Times Square to be exact, on a day that was just cold enough to make your tongue stick to a pole, but not cold enough to make you want to crawl up under covers and not move until June. We met on one of the streets. I greeted her with a hug. She had grabbed my hand, and then we began to walk to our destination. Now, at first, I didn't think anything about it. We ate dinner, had some conversation, proceeded to walk to another place. She grabbed my arm. We were walking down the street, interlocked like a barrel of monkeys. At first, I thought it was pretty cool, until she wanted to hold my hands on a day it was colder than Santa's nose. I wanted to stick my hands in my pocket and then walk through the streets of New York because they were polluted with people, as it was Super Bowl. She then demanded that we hold hands. No, you have to hold my hand. It's a requirement. She was walking pretty slow. It was really cold. We were holding hands. And I really wasn't sure if I liked her or not. I had enough. I let go and said that we needed to walk faster. She stood there in the middle of the block. She didn't move. I turned around and started a staring contest with her. I had to put my foot down. I didn't want to hold hands, and I felt violated being forced to engage in boyfriend-girlfriend behavior with a girl that I hardly knew. After about 5 minutes, or more like 20 seconds, that felt like 5 minutes, I turned around and then kept walking. She turned and went home. I never saw her again. To my credit, I told her that I wanted to take things pretty slow. Lady number 2. It's like the woman that I'm meeting on Tinder, just keep getting more strange. This one, I didn't really want to meet, but during all of my travels, I got really bored and found a match. So one night, I had absolutely nothing to do. I wasn't feeling like staying in my room, so we decided on a meetup. She was pretty cool. She had long hair, laughed at all of my jokes. We talked on the phone a lot, sent each other text messages for a day, and when we met, it was like I met one of the girls from BAPS. This girl was pretty nice, but she didn't have all of the marbles. We went out to a very nice, rather upscale spot to eat and drink. She proceeded to act like she has never been out on a nice date before. Think of those vines. She acted like a fool. The following phrases came out of her mouth. Can I snag these glasses? Regular Hennessy? Can I take this vase? I'm definitely an alcoholic. My brother bought a natty ice at 10 a.m., and if we do that, I'm going to stalk you. I think she was just playing, but I really didn't want to take any chances. I faked like I was tired, and then ended the date pretty fast. Lady number 3. I actually never really did meet her. In fact, I had forgotten all about her. I have a habit of getting matches on there and never sending a single message. But this one woman sent me the message first. We began to talk, and then we exchanged numbers. It started with a few messages, then a phone call. She cursed a lot, but I figured that it was just a New York thing. One day during a conversation, she had told me that she wanted to get to know me a little bit better before she jumped on my dick and let me screw her brains out. One day after I hadn't called her or texted her, she called me, cursed a lot, said the F word a lot of times. I was pretty impressed. I thought that she was a bit crazy. So not really caring, I quoted John Mayer, jokingly, which was a bad idea. She flipped out and cursed even more, started to threaten me, and texting me until about 2 a.m. It was definitely the strangest thing that I have ever experienced. I never met this woman in person, but I haven't given up on Tinder yet. I think I will never learn. I liked a few meetups with some of the guys on Tinder. Whenever I got bored with one dude, I would just move on to the next. One time, I scrolled into a profile of a guy named Daniel. Seemed like a really nice guy. He had served in the Navy, so I decided that it would be okay to meet up with him and see what would happen from there. None of the previous meetups ever prepared me for this one. The day we met, I drove 45 minutes to a hotel where I met him. The plan was to get some dinner, then spend the night together. I left everything except for my wallet at the hotel. We drove to Outback. Everything started smoothly with casual conversation and really good food. It was a normal date, right? Suddenly, his phone rang. He said that it was a call from his superior. He had stepped out. Right after he left the table, something had felt off about this whole situation. The waiter brought us our food. I texted Daniel to let him know that his meal had arrived. He answered me at first, but I waited. My messages stopped going through. I was all the way through my meal, and then I realized that he had ditched me. Paid for the food, walked outside. I sat on a bench beside the restaurant, called one of my closest friends so that they can come and get me. I kept thinking that this man probably had stolen my car. I knew that my dad would kill me because I had told my parents that I was spending the night at one of my friends' houses, not meeting some random dude at a restaurant. After I recovered from all the shock in my friend's car, I called up the hotel, told the desk manager that I didn't know the guy's last name, but I definitely knew his room number. Explained that I had left things in his room, wanted to know if I could go back to get them. She explained that he had checked out because they had emergency come up. When she went to go check on the room, lo and behold, he put all of my things right outside of the hotel room door. I did get my car back, though. Learned that I should probably investigate all of my Tinder prospects a little bit more next time. That date could have gone way worse. It definitely made me realize that I can't trust strangers from any dating app, even if they say that they are in the military. I once had a guy come over. He was very attractive. We had sex, and then went to sleep. I had to work at 2 p.m. the next day. I woke this kid up at noon and told him, "Bro, I gotta get ready for work. You have to leave." My room was spotless at the time. He started to get dressed. He suddenly couldn't find one sock. Accused me of stealing it. I was like, "Why would I want your crusty sock?" He started searching through all of my drawers, dumped out all of my dirty clothes from the hamper, just looking for it. Suddenly, I ended up finding it weeks later in my sock drawer. Kinda think that he planted it there, but I'm not sure why. So he finally starts to leave. His car got towed because he parked exactly where I told him that he should not. Looking back, I would have told him too bad. Got him an Uber, and then went to work. I drove him to the car tow place, just so he could get it back. And of course, he doesn't have his wallet. I had to pay for it, sign for it, because he didn't have his ID on him. The car tow place doesn't take cards, so I had to go to the ATM to pull out cash. He finally got his car. I'm already like 30 minutes or so late for work. He goes, "All right, I will call you later." And I just told him don't ever talk to me again. He had texted me a few hours later and said that he had lost the stylus for his phone. I decided to block his number. I had decided to meet up with a guy at a bar. It was like pulling teeth. I tried to talk about travel. I don't see why anyone would ever want to leave the United States. I tried to talk about running. I don't know why people run for fun. Finally, he tells me something, as he says he likes cars. I tell him about my brother and how he just purchased an Aston Martin. Aston Martins are shit. I really only like Camaros. I told him that I drove an old Camaro for about 10 years. You don't know shit about cars. I don't, not going to deny that, but all I said was that I drove a Camaro from the age of 17 to 26. To top it off, he talks about no fap, how he tried that, but it just made him infuriated. He follows strict masturbation once every 3 days policy. As we had parted ways, he tries to go in for a handshake. I jokingly asked if he masturbated today. He told me yes, he did. I asked him if he washed his hands. He suddenly hesitates. I smile, and then I say goodbye, leaving his hand hanging out there. By the time that I got home, he had already deleted me from Tinder. 3 years ago, I tried Tinder for the first time. I was 25 at the time, and while most 25-year-old women have dabbled on Tinder or the like, I haven't been single since I was 17. I met my ex while I was in high school. 6 years later, we got married, had a baby. I was happy. But those last couple of years together, he had really begun to resent me and the family that we created. I fought to keep the relationship together, but the abuse became more frequent and more intense. It got to the point where I took our baby and fled the house in the middle of the night. My mind was scarred, and my heart was raw. It was a really difficult time. After a couple of months, I had a new home, a new job, and a renewed sense of life. I was starting to open up and could feel myself healing. I was, however, lonely. I was adjusting to shared custody and spent the weekends alone. I didn't want to jump into a relationship, but I did not want to experience some of the things my 8-year-old relationship hadn't allowed me to. Joining Tinder felt fun. It was new and scary. After so much trauma, it felt nice to have so much positive attention. My self-worth was low, so the cheap compliments and instant gratification of the app felt incredible. All I wanted was to feel desirable. That's when I met Derek. Derek was an average guy. He was cute enough, though, but not so attractive that I felt self-conscious. Derek and I shared a few interests: craft beer, hiking, and he had a sense of humor that I liked. We agreed to meet up at a local restaurant. I was nervous. My first date in 8 years. I donned my cutest dress, got made up, and then headed out. As I waited in the restaurant, my palms were sweaty. My heart was fluttering. I began to question myself. He arrived, and everything was awkward at first. We ordered our first beers and started to break the ice. As soon as the buzz of the alcohol began to hit, our conversation took off. We had relaxed in each other's company, and the rest of the date went smoothly. We joked about karaoke across town. He laughed about how he didn't like karaoke. I'm a huge fan of it. While no superstar, I haven't spent a good amount of time in choir and can carry a tune well enough. One of my favorite rowdy weekend activities is going to that bar and busting out some songs with the sweet taste of gin on my tongue. I convinced him to go with me. We left the restaurant. We sang into the night, taking shots, flirting, and laughing. We ended the night in his truck, clumsily fumbling with each other's buttons and zippers, hearts racing with excitement. This had been what I needed. We texted back and forth more often, and soon we were talking about another date. I enjoyed our time together, and liked that I didn't feel a deep connection with him. It was fun, and that was it. Because my heart wasn't tangled up in feelings, he felt safe. We decided for our second date that we would go tubing down a river that runs through our town. We parked his orange truck at the end of the tubing run, took the tubes in my truck upriver. We agreed that we would zip my truck key with his into his pocket, and that he would drop me off at my truck afterwards. Bright summer heat warmed our skin, and the water felt crisp and fresh on our toes. The afternoon slipped past us as we floated down the river. When we reached the bottom, we deflated our tubes and headed back to the truck. Only when Derek reached into his pocket, his face sank. He looked at me and said, "Your key is gone." I laughed. Surely he was joking. He insisted this isn't a joke. Gravity pulled at my stomach, and I began to panic. This was the only copy of my truck key, and I had taken it on the river. I felt foolish and worried about how I would get a new key if we couldn't find it. The river was long. We had been tubing for hours. We'd stopped at several places to swim. He offered to drive me home, and I accepted. During the drive, we made a plan to meet up the next day for a search for my key at some of the stops that we had made. We spent the afternoon combing our swimming holes for my key, up and down, with every little hope that we would ever see my keys. We had to try, though, and we kept at it. From one spot to another, we drove, we swam, and we moved on. At the very last place we checked, As the light of the afternoon faded into a hazy orange, something caught his eye. Underwater near the shore were my keys. We were elated and could not believe our luck. To celebrate, we went back to his place for some drinks. He drove me down a long wooded driveway, and at the very end was a tattered trailer. He told me that he was only renting a room here from an elderly couple, but they were on vacation, so we would be alone. We walked over the creaking porch and entered into the trailer. Inside, I could see the kitchen was messy. Not just a couple of dishes, but every surface was covered with mess. He ushered me away to show me his room. It was small, not very clean either. Dirty clothes, mattress on the floor, a Rubbermaid bin with some snacks like Doritos and cheap warm beer. We had sex. The yellowed light of the trailer aculated the stains on the wall. Afterwards, the spark of fun I felt when we first met had withered, and I felt gross. I decided that it would be our last date. A week passed, and we hardly texted. Our brief fling was ending, and I didn't expect to see him again. My mind moved on to other things. The coming weekend, my friends were coming down to town, and I was excited. We made plans to go to karaoke together on Saturday night. When the day arrived, I was surprised to see a text from Derek on my phone. "Are you going to karaoke tonight?" I responded that I was. He texted back that he would be there. "I thought you didn't like karaoke," I asked him. And he said that he had been invited by a girl he worked with and thought he would give me a heads up that he would be with a date in case I was there. I thanked him for taking the time to let me know. Reassured him that I wouldn't be bothered at all and said that I hoped he had a great date. 9:30 that night, my friends and I arrived at the bar. The dim lights and reflective foil stars on all too familiar scene. We got our drinks, picked a booth with a good view of the stage. I had a strange sensation, like someone was watching me. I turned my head, scanning the bar, and our eyes locked. Derek and his date were a few booths away, and he was watching us. He waved zealously with a big smile. His date turned around to look, and I managed an awkward wave. I was absolutely fine with him being on a date, but I didn't want to advertise that we knew each other or make his date uncomfortable. My friends were well aware of the time we had spent together, my thoughts on the experience, and the text he had sent me earlier. We were all thinking it was a bit odd that he would go out of his way to interact with me in front of his date, but no harm, no foul. He was just being friendly. The evening carried on. We all had a great time, basking in the atmosphere, drinking in the songs and laughter. A couple of hours in, we were sitting in our booth, when Derek stumbled over to our table with his date. He introduced her as Kate, and plopped down beside me, pulling her down into our booth next to him. The strong smell of alcohol oozed off of him. I could see they were hammered. It became obvious that they both had drank too much. Their eyes were glazed, words slurred. Kate seemed really nice, despite her state, and she launched into a drunk story to the whole table. We were all fairly uncomfortable, and were unsure what was going on. Under the table, I felt Derek's sticky hand slide into my thigh. His date was right there, and I was stunned. Without making a scene, I removed his hand and excused myself to get another drink. As I walked across the room, I could feel his eyes raking my back, and sure enough, when I turned around, he was watching. When I got back, Kate was slurring that her taxi had come. She and Derek exchanged a sloppy kiss and goodnights. Then it was just us and Derek. His mood shifted after that. He was drunkenly unaware of how uncomfortable the table was, and we could tell that he was brooding about his date having left without him. Derek turned his attention to me. He slung his heavy arm over my shoulder and leaned in, his sour breath managing to come together to form clumsy sentences. "You're so cute. I love your laugh." I was rigid and just wanted to leave. When he got up to get another beer, my friends and I spoke about the situation. One of them remarking, "You know you can do better than this, right?" I told them yes. As casual as this has been, I had made a mistake. We came to the conclusion it would be best if we ended the night early, as we didn't see him leaving me alone. As the backup plan, if anything went south, we agreed that the girls would go to the bathroom, leave out the back door while our male friend would distract him, and then slip away. Derek came back to the table, sloshing his beer onto his front. He slurred, Where are you going next?" I hesitated, but my friend told him that we would all be going home. Derek said that he would walk us there. We politely declined. He was leaning up against a wall, barely holding himself up at this point. We asked him how he was going to get home, and if we could call him a taxi. Derek drunkenly pouted that he would just go to my place with me, trying to shut him down as politely as I could. I told him that my child was there with a sitter, so I couldn't have him over. He refused a taxi, and said he would just sleep in his truck. Since his eyelids were drooping, and looking at the rest of the state, it seemed reasonable that he would be able to fall asleep in a truck, and we accepted that answer. As we started to leave, he stumbled after us. We stopped and reminded him that we were going to bed. He argued again that he should come with me. My friends and I locked eyes. It was time to engage with our backup plan. The two girls and I excused ourselves to the washroom, while our friends distracted him, slipping out the back door. The cool rush of night air hit us, and we hurried to the path that led to their hotel. Our friend caught up with us, and said that he had left Derek behind at the bar. We were all relieved to be out of there, and started to walk back to their hotel. One of the girls was sober, and offered to drive me home when we got to the hotel. I accepted. A few minutes down the path, my phone rang. I looked at the caller ID, and I felt my stomach drop. It was Derek. I turned the volume down and let it ring, and to my surprise, he left me a voicemail. I turned it on speaker and played it out loud. Derek's voice sounded confused as his words melted together into the phone. "Where are you guys? I thought you guys were going to hang out. I don't understand." We were all glad that we left, and agreed that this had been wild. That's when the phone rang again. Another voicemail popped up on my screen. In the dim light of the trail, I played the new voicemail aloud once more. His drunken speech was more intense this time, as he launched into how he didn't understand why I had left. I had hurt his feelings, and he was in love with me. The tone of his voice shook me when I heard him say, "I love you." There was something dark and heavy about it that left me feeling unsettled. We were all creeped out, but happy to see the bright sign of the hotel ahead. We traveled the carpeted hallway to their room so my friend could grab her keys to take me home. As we entered the room, my phone began to ring again. This time the voicemail sent shockwaves of fear through my body. Derek's voice had taken on an edge, as he repeated that he loved me. That he was really fucking mad at me for leaving him at the bar. He went on about how I could do that to him, and he didn't know what he was going to do. His voice shook with anger as he stumbled over himself, expressing how I had betrayed him. The last thing he said before hanging up echoed in the hotel room. "You know, I'm really starting to fucking hate you." This guy was unhinged, and I was terrified. I was grateful this side of Derek hadn't shown up when we were alone in his secluded trailer. My friends gave me a hug, told me to call them if I needed anything, and to keep them updated. My friend took me home, and as I unlocked the door and stepped into the comfort of my home, I felt exhausted. It had not been the night out that I expected, and Derek's erratic behavior had really freaked me out. Fresh out of an abusive relationship, his actions at the bar, then the voicemails rang some all too familiar bells. That's when I saw the headlights. It was very late for anyone to be driving down my street. I peeked through the curtain. My blood ran cold, and I trembled. Sitting in the cab of his orange truck was Derek. Mind racing, I panicked. This dude could barely hold himself up when we left. He was blackout obliterated. How did he drive across town to my house? How did he even find me? I immediately remembered the other week when he dropped me off after my key was lost. How could I have been so stupid? I barely knew him. We had only met 3 times. Derek's face was stony and etched with rage as he sat in the dark cab staring at my house. He wasn't getting out. He was just staring, while I was on my hands and knees peeking out of the window. All the lights were off inside. I was sure that he couldn't see me. Then the screen on my phone lit up. He was calling me yet again. I quickly hid it so that he wouldn't see the light. My hands were shaking. I played the voicemail as quietly as I could. Derek only said one thing this time, a phrase that sent terror shooting down my spine. In a drunken sing-song voice, almost taunting me, he quietly said, "Where are you?" I was terrified. Somehow I hadn't really considered I could be in danger, and chalked up all the fear of my past experiences. Surely I was overreacting, and it was my fault for reading into this too much. I shouldn't be this scared, and I don't want to make a scene. That last voicemail sealed the deal. I figured even if I was overreacting, at the very least he was drunk driving. I called 911, and the dispatcher said someone would be there in a couple of minutes. As I peeked out the window, I saw him get out of his truck. He was done waiting. His heavy feet stumbled as they hit the pavement, and he looked around. Derek's voice cut through the night. He started yelling my name. The wild anger in his voice was tangible through the walls, and he just yelled into the street, "Where are you?" Derek started to stumble towards my house, when the flashing red and blue lights cascaded down the street, lighting up his face and highlighting every ounce of rage carved into his features. The 2 police cars pulled up, and the officers got out. I was still peeking out from inside my dark house, and couldn't hear much of what was happening. I watched them breathalyze him, which he obviously failed. The officers inspected his truck. They all spoke for a little while. One of the officers came to my door. I spoke to him about what had happened, and he was very empathetic. He said as unsettling as this actions had been, there wasn't much that they could do without a direct threat. The officer let me know that they would be taking him in for the night, and he would be charged with drunk driving, but that he would be out tomorrow, and to make sure that I keep my doors locked and stay safe. The tow truck came to remove his orange truck from the road. I could see him arguing. The officers weren't having any of it, and they turned him around to cuff him. As the handcuffs locked around his wrist, he yelled out one last time, looking directly at the window I was peeking out. "I know you're in there. Why don't you come out to say goodnight?" As quickly as my street had filled up, it was empty, the quiet shadows of the late night swallowing the early chaos into nothingness. Derek texted me the next afternoon. "I'm very sorry about last night. I was in a bad place." I responded that his actions were unacceptable, and how dare he show up at my house, with my child lives at, and that I could prefer not to hear from him ever again. He apologized one last time, and I haven't heard from him since. Over the next few months, I could see him on a bike going to and from his workplace, so I know that he lost his license. I was always wary that we would bump into each other, which thankfully never happened. I can only imagine how much angrier he was after that night, when he lost his license. I found out that he moved to the mainland a little while back, which was quite a relief for me.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.